able to teach them that process. I do know that some school districts have had conversations around using the circle process around issues having to do with equity and disproportionality and power and privilege, and that has brought some members out to, or parents and family members out to events with the school to have those kinds of conversations.
Thank you, Sharon. Louise, I'm going to open up your mic. I believe you had a question. Let me see here. Louise, your mic is now open. Welcome.
Hi, I'm actually from Canada, and I know a lot about restorative justice, but I am new to the place where I live, and I would just like to walk into a school and have them open their arms to me, but that might not be possible. So I'm wondering if you have any suggestions when you're trying to kind of cold call it.
Rita, you have some thoughts about that?
I think, schools are always looking for volunteers, especially if you have a lot of information about restorative justice. I would actually research and see if anybody in that district is doing restorative justice, maybe befriend them, and then maybe befriend the school that's closest to you by calling and letting them know that, you're happy to. I'm not sure how you want to do this, whether you want to volunteer or whether you want to do trainings or, all of that. So I would definitely research, first at the district level if there's anything going on, and then walk into the school and ask them if they would be interested to have a meeting with you and let them know what you can do.
Another suggestion that I would have for you would be to contact the union and see if they were at all interested. Some of the unions in the United States are encouraging their different union groups to consider restorative practices, so that would be another group to look at. The PTA, I think, is always looking for speakers. And so going to that group and talking to them. If there is anybody doing any work in regards to equity, that would be another organization that I would seek out. And then I suppose any other youth-serving organization where you might have an opportunity to do work with youth and the people who work with youth. Those are some other suggestions.
Thank you.
Can we go ahead and take one more question? And thank you, Louise.
Sure.
Thank you. All right, let's go to Chris. Welcome, Chris. Your mic is open.
Yes, thank you. Certainly, in terms of a comment, this has been fantastic because it's so brass tacks, rubber meets the road. It's going to take 4 years. It's going to take forever. It's going to be an ongoing process. But to make a long story short, I just finished a 28-year career in corrections, and I did a lot of criminal justice stuff. I've also done stuff in schools. But here's the bottom line. This coming Monday, I have a meeting with the superintendent of the district, the school district where I live. We're in their exploration stage. I've done a values circle, and basically I'm getting a stipend to be a consultant. And I guess the question would be, okay, there's the situation. I've got a meeting with the superintendent to kind of try to sell this in a way. What would your suggestions be?
Well, I would definitely compile all the research that is being done in restorative justice right now and talk to him about the benefits of adopting restorative justice in schools. Given that you've already done a values circle, they've had some experience, because I would always include the experience piece even when talking to superintendents, because they are also human beings. and it really does speak to them about who they are and what their work is if they can actually have an experience. But I think the main thing most superintendents want to hear is what are the benefits, what kind of time will it take, what would the cost be. I think all the things that you heard Nancy talk about in exploration and all the those different parts of exploration, installation, and implementation. I would take that and be able to, explain that to the superintendent. That's what I would do.
The other thing that I would add is that I would definitely also look for an opportunity to tell a story. That, what's your motivation for why you're doing this? With all of those years in correction, I think you've got lots of examples of why, if only it had been done differently for this kid, that wouldn't have been in this particular situation. And oftentimes the start is with school. And so don't forget to put that piece in there as well, because it's so terribly compelling for people who care about children. So we have, we have about,
10 minutes?
3 minutes left. Yep. So we're now going to go on. Next slide.
Okay. We are looking at challenges. So next slide. So Belinda Hopkins is an educator and a restorative justice practitioner and trainer in England. And she came up with this pyramid that's very helpful when you think about what are the different parts of the circle process or restorative justice you need to establish. So the first thing is establishing the values or the ethos in the school. So how do you do that? That's almost like the tier one piece that we always refer to in PBIS and in restorative justice, the tier one of the building the relationships, getting everybody on the same page of how do we talk to each other, what are our values, can we hold these values, what happens when we don't hold these values, and create this space of caring. That's what you want to do. And then what you have to do is teach the skills that need to continue making this ethos strengthen and build, which is, communication is a big one. How do you talk to each other? How do you listen? That's huge. We in America love to talk. And it's really helpful when you have a very, very good listener. If there's any situations of harm that happens, you really want to be able to do that. To be able to listen when you're sitting in a circle, building community to understand each other. And then the different processes that we have. We've been talking a lot about circles. There's also restorative conversations where you go through the questions that you can ask about what happened, what do you need, those questions, the restorative questions. There's also restorative conferences that's done a little bit differently from how the circles when you're repairing relationship happen, but there's various processes that you can use. And so being able to take all this into account and make it happen is helpful. Next slide. So the restorative mindset. You do want to do things with people as opposed to 2 people or 4 people. You want to make sure there's conversations and lots of reflection around power and equity. I think that's the piece that's the hardest about doing this work, is that when you're sitting in circle, you are equal to whoever you're sitting there with. And that makes it hard, especially in a hierarchical institution like we have in schools. The restorative mindset also includes compassion, because what people have experienced is trauma, and people come to schools with their trauma. People teach after going through trauma. So there's a way where trauma is very present in schools, and developing compassion and being able to hold that so that you can actually of learning and teaching that we are doing in schools. The restorative mindset also includes wisdom, where the experience and knowledge and good judgment and the feeling of being wise comes into play. And one of the good ways to think about things is having that long view of noticing what each of us have gone through in the past and how we are going to handle things in the future and the people in the future. So when you think about all the stuff that's going on with fracking and tar sands and all of that, what is it doing to our beautiful planet, and what is it doing to the generations that are coming forward? So you want to be able to use these of doing things with somebody, with compassion and with wisdom to inform what you do. The next slide is about looking at, and I would encourage you to watch this TED Talk by Philip Zimbardo, and he talks about how we look at what's wrong when somebody does something wrong, and we just keep that wrongness within that person. So that is the bad apple, child, or that student, or a lot of times that adult, is the bad apple. They're doing things wrong. There's something wrong with them, and we don't think about what is the situation surrounding that. What do our classrooms look like? What our schools look like? Do we have drinking fountains that work? So we environment. We have to look at whether we are a welcoming space. When you look at the bigger influences, the systemic influences, what do we have to work with? One classroom where there's 35 students to one adult. That's a systemic issue. We need to talk about that. So when we look at bad apples, looking at the barrel that holds the apples, before you make a decision about excluding somebody, looking at the system, who are making these barrels? What are we doing when we are instituting these things? Next slide. So when we looked at the comparison of institution and community, what we found at institution, there are lots of rules. And where community is concerned, we have those kind of guiding principles, but we have them through values. In institutions, the third party makes the decision. If something wrong happens, the judge makes the decision, the principal makes the decision, versus in community, if we're building community and bringing community into schools, then the people who've been involved in the situation are the ones who actually make the decision. In institution, we go by reason. There's no place for emotion. And in community, we have reason and we have emotion. The emotions let us know how we need to proceed. In institutions, it's all about facts, just the facts, right? And in community, we talk about the facts, but we talk about it in context, in a story that's filled in. And so when we look at policy, when we look at what we need to adopt, we definitely want RJ to not be a top-down mandate. We really need to build a community and go from bottom up and top down so we can meet. We have to have adults using RJ for their own community building and dealing with our own conflicts. We don't deal with our conflicts as adults in schools. We have to think about other policies, like allowing instructional minutes to be used for circles and social emotional learning. For intervention and reentry, we have to start understanding how can we use restorative discipline as part of the discipline code. That restorative discipline is the first place we go to when something wrong happens, not only for the lighter situations. We have to have systems that can track and report data so we know how to move forward. Fidelity checks for how we're doing the process, because a lot of people are calling a lot of things restorative justice, and when they don't follow the process as needed, then I'm not sure what they're doing at this point. So let's see, what is on the next slide? The structure, the support that you need. Like, for example, in some classrooms, you can't, and then you look at the science lab, you can't move those tables. So you have to have rooms and space and time and a team of trained people that can help you. You need staff. Nobody wants to talk about hiring people for RJ until, things grow. But that really helps to grow what you're trying to do. Maybe as an expulsion case manager, when I was in Oakland doing case management of children who are up for expulsion, I talked to my supervisors, Jackie Wong and Gail Wang, and said, can I do RJ for 20% of my time? Because that is an alternative that's going to help with suspensions and expulsions. And maybe the district has to consider, what does it mean to have teachers attend these trainings? They have to have substitutes. Teachers attending the conferences and the circles, thinking about providing substitutes. So children, the next slide please, and shared leadership. Here we go again to power. Are we going to listen to our young people as partners? That's huge. Yes, they're young, but they have a lot of good ideas, and we don't have to be adultist about it. Just because as a young person we weren't listened to, we have to be able to listen to them because they come up with some really imaginative, creative things. Next slide. And
so now we have cautions. Yes, thanks, Rita. Just a couple of things that came to our mind. Cautions in regards to choice and ability. So the first one, I think, which is a big challenge, is that a core principle for a restorative process is that people choose to do it. You might convince them to do it, you might encourage them to do it, but ultimately a person has to make a choice to participate. So if you're scaling up restorative practices in schools, should this be true at every level? Should we ever push people to do restorative practices? I just can observe that I know that some schools are being pushed to do restorative practices by the U.S. Department of Education when they seek to have schools remediate for disproportionality, for instance. But that can have a consequence. We might have to address the impact of people being strongly encouraged or being forced because that might have an unintended outcome. And so in those instances, I would just suggest that we participate in a circle to talk about what harm might have come because people were forced to have to do something that they didn't initially choose to do. Next slide. And then there is the issue of ability. And these are questions I don't have the answers to. Can we expect every adult to be able to run a circle? Can we make it so that every adult has support in being able to run a circle? Can we expect all adults to be non-shaming? Some people may have a genetic predisposition to rolling their eyes. Can we help them to not do that? Can all adults trust youth? I don't know what everybody's experience has been with young people. I don't know if that's possible. But it's what is really necessary if you're going to have a truly restorative school. Can all adults be compassionate? Can they ask the question, I wondered what happened to that child that they're acting this way, as opposed to what's wrong with that child? How we support people is a critical issue as we encourage people to try to do this. And do we encourage them to go to another job? Do we encourage them to go to another school if they can't do this in a restorative school? Do we provide them extra supports? What is it that we do when we think about people's ability? And I don't know the answer to those questions, but I think that those are some cautions that we need to take into account. Next slide. So here we come to our last round of comments and questions.
Thank you, Nancy and Rita, so much. So just a reminder, we've reset the hands. So please, again, if you still have a question, we didn't get to all of them, press 1 on your telephone keypad. So we'll go ahead and open up the conversation here. Barb, welcome.
Hello.
Hi, Barb. Where are you from?
Upstate New York, Central New York. Can you hear me?
Yep,
yes.
You're great.
Okay, Central New York. So you answered my question on many different times. along the way, but I want to hear something just again because